Hello friends and painters, welcome to another video. In the introductory video, we got acquainted with the contents of the box and cleaned and prepared all the parts for painting. In this video, we will focus on the acrylic base before using all paints. First, however, I will prepare all the parts for the holders. I use handles from work tools such as a file, a saw, etc. They fit well in my hand and are not heavy. I will start with the body, which will be attached to the wooden base. I am not gluing anything yet. I will stuck it, which will glue the bust to the wooden base. After all, this is my first attempt of painting a fantasy bust with all paints, and I do not know if the result will be as I expected. I have the other parts already prepared and drilled holes for pinning. I have paper clips glued to the wooden boulders. All you need to do is use super glue and glue the parts to the holders. It is quite quick. I then place the handles in a stand, which is a piece of wood with holes drilled the size of the handles. Once everything is ready, it's time for the first coat of paint. This is always primer. It's important. It prepares the surface for the next coat of paint. It also reveals any surface flaws that we missed when cleaning. You can use primer in a can as a spray or apply it with an airbrush as I did. I have found that when I buy a new product to try, I immediately forgot about the old one I was using. This also applies to the white primer from AK Interactive, so I put it back in my repertoire and started using it again. I mixed a mix of two primers, one grey from Vallejo and the other the aforementioned with from AK Interactive. I don't think anything will change in quality if I mix the two together. As I thinner, I use my tried and test window cleaner. The consistency should be about like milk. Please, don't ask me what the consistency of milk is. I don't look at its consistency when I add it to my coffee. When I applying primer, I try to do thin layers. A thick layer would drown out the details and everything would take a long time to dry. That's why I proceed as follows. First, I apply one thin layer and set the part aside. I take the next part in the sequence and apply another thin layer. I do this until all the parts have their first thin layer finished. Then I go back to the beginning and apply another thin layer. I do the same on all the parts. After the second layer is finished, I look at everything and decide if I need another third layer. Usually 2 layers of primer are enough, and sometimes only some adjustments and repairs are needed. When I am done, I let everything dry. All the parts dry and I have time to clean my airbrush and prepare the next color. Those who know me know that I do preshading and I use Tamiya paints for this step. I have good experience with them, especially when applying airbrush. However, I decided to try a different brand of paint for this step. I decided this because I go to stores that don't have Tamiya paint, and ordering only 2 or 3 colors from an online store seemed strange to me. I prefer to buy everything in one place and in person. I choose the company Vallejo in a dark, cheerful shade. Judging by the appearance of the bottle, it should be a new line of these colors. I diluted the paint with window cleaner in a plastic cup and transfer it to the airbrush. I must say that I work very well with the paint. It has a nice shade and the airbrush application is also good. I will use up my old Tamiya paints for side projects and switch fully to Vallejo paint for preshading. When applying the dark blue paint, I focused on applying the paint from the bottom up on the places that will be darker or in the shadow. I apply a thin layer so that the paint has time to dry, and if necessary, I add another layer to make the place darker. Every now and then, I stop and check the placement and depth of the paint. I work slowly, I don't rush anything. I rotate the entire bust so that the paint gradually dries and I can apply everything. I didn't shorten the video so you can see the whole work. I just speed up the image a little. The dark shade is done and I need to create contrast. That's why I choose white paint, which I will apply from top to bottom. I thinned the paint with window cleaner and transfer it to the airbrush. I did the same as with the dark shade. The only difference was in the direction of application, from top to bottom. I focus on the places that are more under the light, more illuminated where more light falls. I keep applying a thin layer and turning the bust around. The paint has time to dry and I don't interrupt my work. I check from time to time to see the distribution of light and dark areas. It's a calming job and not at all complicated. I didn't shorten the video again, I just speed up the image. It's common knowledge that orcs are green. I don't know who decided it. It's true that we can choose any color for their skin. I would probably stick to a little bit of reality. By that, I mean the color for a humanoid creature. Personally, I choose green. I started with the dark shade, which I apply to the places that are darker, more in the shadows. At the beginning, I didn't want the whole bust to be green. It's true that the box art on the box was really good, and that was one of the reasons why I bought the bust. However, I wanted to have something different at home, something that would be more realistic, more believable. I searched the internet for inspiration from other miniature painters for a while until I came across the painter Arnaud Lazaro and his bust of an orc. I immediately knew that this was exactly the color combination I was looking for. That's why, when applying dark green paint, I left out the pectoral muscles and abdomen on the bust. I've already mentioned this, but the back of the bust is not as detailed as the front. I mean the muscle and their depth and sophistication. If your pectoral muscles are so detailed that you can see the muscle fibers there, your subcutaneous fat is at the very low level, and this will be reflected throughout your body. Therefore, it also works your back muscles, shoulder muscles, etc. Please, don't take this as a mistake, just a small note. Okay, back to painting. I used a light green as the next color. It is a warmer green because you can see the yellowish undertones of the color. I apply the color from the top to bottom, focusing on the areas that will be lighter. I apply a thin layer. The compressor is set to 1.2 bar 70.4 psi and the airbrush has a 0.3 mm needle. I work slowly and rotate the butt so that the color have time to dry and I can apply another layer if necessary. Now comes the fun part. Prepare the front part of the bust, namely the stomach, pectoral muscles and face. First, I will prepare the colors. As you know, I choose a skin tone and I will use the basic colors, yellow, red and blue. First, I mix yellow and red. Then, I added a blue to dampen the brightness of the resulting shade and add a little cool tone. From the beginning, I wanted to achieve more contrast. That's why I didn't add white paint and started applying the skin tones right away. I apply the shade from the bottom up. I focus on the places where this shade would be and the places that would be darker. On the surface, this shade started to overlap the previous green shade. These will be exactly the places where the shades created with all paints will overlap. On the face, I wanted to have a skin tone around the eyes and on the nose. That's why I applied the shade directly to the eyes to cover the green color. I also added color between the eyes, on the forehead, and also around the nose. I can't forget the ears, or rather, on the inside of the ears. I also applied the color to the inside of the arms, just a little, because this place won't be so visible. As the last shade I applied the light skin tone. I just added white paint, mix everything, and pour it into the airbrush. I apply the color from top to bottom. I focus on the places more under the light. I needed to create more contrast, so I lightened the color more than usually. The result looks really good already when applying the first layer. You can see good contrast and subtle transitions between the skin tone and the green color. I also applied color around the eyes, forehead and nose. I also applied color to the lower lip and around the teeth. Towards the end, I only added more contrast in some places. I have to finish the rest with oil paint. I just prepare a base color for oil paints with an airbrush. An airbrush is not a delicate and detailed work. The result looks really good, and I am looking forward to starting to apply oil paint. Thank you very much for your patience and support. Keep painting and see you soon.